Welcome to the UK PTs podcast, where we delve into the world of personal training one episode at a time. Here are your hosts, Joshua Mullin and Mark Laws.
Right, okay, so Phil, we are going to inaugurate you into the 27 club. Round one is based on your education. Are you ready? Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, in which year did you qualify?
1997, I think it was.
And who was the education provider?
The YMCA.
How long did it take you to complete your training from start to finish?
I can't recall exactly. I think it was 6 weeks, 6 weekends, I think it was.
Okay.
Long time ago.
And what was the last bit of CPD that you completed?
As a personal trainer, because obviously
Yes.
I've been out the personal training game now for about 5 years.
Okay, well, just any CPD, or if it's outside of PT.
Last CPD as a trainer was probably with Athletes Performance in Florida.
Okay. And what is the next bit of CPD that you have your eye on, probably from a business perspective?
From a business perspective, to be honest, the vast majority of CPD stuff I do now as a business is normally mentorship stuff with individuals who can help me with certain facets of my business. So they're not training providers as such.
Cool. What is the highest level of qualification or education that you possess?
I have a degree in sport and exercise science.
Should a personal trainer ever be reassessed? And if so, how often?
Yes. How often? Probably every 6 to 12 months, I would imagine.
Cool. What skill did you gain on your personal training course that you use most often?
They did a little piece that I reference quite often, which is a communication piece where they got us to coach a squat without speaking, and then you had to coach it without moving.
Nice. And the last question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at your job?
That's not for me to decide.
Josh, round two.
Okay, so round two is all about the industry, which,
Cool.
hot topics. So, you ready with the timer, Mark?
Yep.
Okay, let's go. So name the most underrated person, product, or thing in the fitness industry.
Again, communication. Lacking in skills in communication.
And what's the most overrated person, product, or thing in the fitness industry?
Oh, millions of things. Overrated. Pass.
Which book should all personal trainers read?
Depends what they're trying to learn.
Okay. Foam rolling, yes or no?
Depends.
For how long did you do gym hours before being exclusive as a PT?
How many years?
Yeah.
How many years? It was about 2 years.
Nice. Okay. Which common fitness myth do you wish you could debunk forever?
Fitness myth. Millions of them again. Knees in front of toes.
What is the best piece of work-related advice you've ever been given?
Listen.
Good times. Who would be the ultimate fitness industry podcast guest?
The Rock.
Oh, that's a good one.
I don't think he'd learn much about the fitness industry, but he'd be an awesome guest.
Finally, what are your favourite 3 exercises?
Squat, deadlift, and probably a hang clean.
Woo! Just in the bracket. Oh, nice.
Time. Perfect. Right.
Sorry. I answer depends an awful lot.
That's all right. It does depend an awful lot.
I'm a big context man.
Yeah.
I'm a context and a depends man.
And we can't fit a lot of context in the quickfire round, but we will elaborate in the interview. Don't you worry.
Cool.
Right, round 3, final round, Phil. All personal
Cool.
stuff, so people get to know a little bit more about you. You all good to go?
Yep.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Favorite city that you've ever visited?
New York.
If you could attend any concert, dead or alive, who would be playing?
Who would be playing? Rolling Stones.
What was the last TV series that you watched or streamed an episode of?
The Fall.
And if you could choose anybody to play you in a movie about your life, who would it be?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. I can see it. There's an element there. Tea or coffee, and how do you take it?
Coffee, black.
Would you rather go back in time to speak to your ancestors or forwards in time to speak to your descendants?
Back in time.
And would you rather shag a goat and nobody will ever find out about it? Or would you not shag the goat, but everybody will think that you have?
Not shag the goat.
Good answer. Please tell us one thing that is still on your bucket list.
On my bucket list. Oh, wow. Route 66.
Nice. On a bike or by car, on foot?
However, probably given the size of the family, probably in a whopping great, what do you call them? What's the American term for them? It's not a people carrier. What do you call them? Yeah, you know what I'm Winnebago. That's what they call them. Winnebago. Big ass Winnebago. I'm sure the kids will be bored out the teeth, mine, but hey, yo.
Hey, it's not their trip, is it?
Try and convince them of that whilst you're on it.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Cool. All good. Phil Learney, you are now a member of the 27 Club. Welcome.
Awesome. Do I get a certificate or a badge or something?
Yeah, if Josh prints out some certificates, we'll send it across. We'll maybe get like a T-shirt or something like that.
Excellent.
Josh, there was a few questions that popped up in the UK PTs group. If we hit them now at the start, and then we'll lead into like the rest of the interview, just go through some of them, mate.
Okay, so someone called Harm Honey, I'm not sure if that's the real name or an alias, has said, I would like to ask a question about DOMs. It was just really to figure out what would be the most efficient way to build strength. Is it best to have slight DOMs the day after and rest for a day, or have more significant DOMs and rest for a couple of days, or not have any stiffness and train every day?
Okay, how long we got on this?
As long as you want.
Right, so delayed onset muscle soreness. First thing you probably need to grasp is what DOMS actually is. From what we know, it doesn't appear to be an indicator of muscular damage, but of connective tissue inflammation, particularly in the sort of extracellular matrix, right? So irrespective of how hard a muscle's trained, that 48-hour window post-training, protein synthesis is kind of unaltered. So what that tells us is after 48 hours, the muscle's done recovering. So if you've still got soreness after that 48-hour period, chances are it's probably connective tissue, which means you probably need to go back. You need to assess your training volume, your frequency, the type of training you're doing, all those kind of things. So soreness surpassing that 48-hour window is reflective of connective tissue inflammation. Okay, so in this context, because we're talking about strength, the considerations are probably slightly different to someone who's looking at muscular size or developing or getting bigger or getting jacked, whatever it might be. So strength's about force production. So it's about getting all those mechanical structures to generate as much force as possible. A lot of which is assisted and aided by connective tissue, obviously. You know, if they're not functioning properly or they're weak or they're not able to stabilize a joint, it doesn't really work. So you need to consider your training plans. You'd have to do some trial and error probably. So if after 48 hours of training, you still have soreness, likelihood is that it's connective tissue. So you would adjust your training volume, your sets, your reps, and all those things to prevent that happening. In strength and size training, the same is largely true. Pushing yourself to that point where soreness surpasses that 48-hour window would more than likely be counterproductive and in conflict with most goals that people are trying to achieve, whether that's strength or whether it's size. So a good way to explain it is in the realms of size training, like bodybuilding, right? So this old school mentality of doing these massive sets. So somebody going and train legs, for example, on a Monday, and they're going to do like 18 to 20 sets or whatever it might be of a muscle group. And this is, you know, people are taking these from Muscle Fitness or Flex magazine. I remember years ago doing it myself. And then you train legs again the following Monday, right? So it's the problem you got with that is that over the course of 18 or 20 sets is what's going to happen is that the amount of weight moved is going to diminish. Intensity is going to diminish because, again, you're going to be going for 45 minutes an hour. Nobody's going to be able to create that level of intensity. Certainly a beginner isn't. And also the frequency, because obviously you're only going to train once every week, right? So we've got to consider all those factors. Now, if I was to take those 18 sets and say, right, well, I've got a 48-hour window of recovery. So every 48 hours, I did a proportion of those sets. So if every 48 hours I did 6 sets, 6 sets, 6 sets, I can maintain volume, intensity, weight, load, etc., etc. So unless, and this is a big if and but, a lot of that material and all that information we got about bodybuilding and things like this came from assisted athletes, which meant that they were constantly in this state of anabolism and protein synthesis because of, various factors, drugs, food, blah, blah, blah. And obviously their sole intent is just to build strength. So they were able to do this massive, massive amount of volume and intensity. And remember, a lot of these guys were full-time bodybuilders, or girls were full-time bodybuilders. So that's all they did. They just trained like hell on a Monday, and all they had to do the rest of the day was sleep or eat or whatever it might be, is recover. So it doesn't really fit with the layman. So when we're talking about strength is about force production, mass times acceleration. So what we've got to consider with DOMs is that if it surpasses that 40-hour window, chances are we're probably getting into tendons, ligaments, and the surrounding connective tissue is going to be still inflamed, which means that there's a much higher potential for injury. So it's probably a matter of going to and taking a look at your training volume, you set up your training plans, and just tapering them back, pulling them back a little bit. This is why if you ever look at an Olympic lifter's schedule, they're so intricate and they control volume and load so like minute, like the micro loading plates, which are like tiny little magnets used to put on the end. That's what they were developed for. This micro loading. The average gym goer doesn't need to worry about micro loading, but an Olympic lifter would, right? So force is mass time acceleration, and obviously when you start to talk about acceleration, I mean, consider cycling. The lengths cycling teams will go to shave minuscule amounts of time off a thing. This is kind of how weightlifting is, or Olympic lifting is. So it's kind of a roundabout question, but if you're still sore after 48 hours, I would assess your training volume, pull it back a little bit. If there's a little bit of soreness, you're probably going to be fine. If there's huge amounts of soreness and you're struggling to move limbs and things like this, you can also do splits where you train different parts of the body at different days, potentially. But obviously, as beginners, there's always that thing of going in too hard too early. So, yeah. DOMs.
Beautiful stuff. I've got a question that came from the Pure Gym PT group that I'm in, from Pete Yardley Patel, and he has asked for some top practical tips for saving time and identifying aspects of your PT service that could either be streamlined or removed altogether.
Well, identifying them is a matter of you looking at your own business and assessing what's taking time within that business. So what are the things that are taking a huge amount of your time? Because ultimately, when we talk about business, you talk about time versus money a lot of the time, and they're interchangeable. As you get more into business, you'll realize that time and money are very much interchangeable. If I can pay someone to do something which is taking me time, that I could potentially be doing something better and making more revenue from it, I'm going to go back to the other one. I always use the analogy of getting a cleaner in, right? You get a cleaner to come in, they're skilled at doing something that you're not particularly good at, and are probably going to do it in a third of the time. And you're probably going to pay them a lot less than probably what you would be earning per hour, right? So a lot of it is about identifying, where those problematic areas in your business sit. And then it's just a matter of finding systems. Is there a digital way of doing this? Is there a more efficient way of doing it? Is it, you go back old school with spreadsheets. When I first started PT, and everybody used to use Excel spreadsheets. So one of the best skills I learned back then was to actually figure out how to do calculations and formulas on Excel sheets. So I'm fairly versed at them nowadays because, I had to use them back then in order to calculate volume and load and all those different things. I just used to put in the numbers and it would calculate it for me. So it's a bit like how you got to look at your business. You got to look at all those aspects of, doing your year end. There's so many PTs out there don't utilize an accountant. Accountants are great because they'll make you money because they know what you can declare and what you can't declare and all those different things. I remember, I pondered on one for about 2 or 3 years. And the first year that I had my accountant, she actually paid for her own wages for the next 4 years in the first 6 months with the money that she saved me and got back through receipts and, things I wasn't declaring and things I wasn't claiming back for. Declaring probably wasn't the word, but, things that I wasn't putting through the business like I should have been. So yeah, you've just got to look at it in kind of an analysis basis, just like you do with your clients and your training programs. PTs PTs have this thing about they look at PT training programs with this huge analysis kind of head on, but they don't look at any other aspect of the business. Which is why a lot of the stuff that we do is about business, because it's the one real weak point PTs generally have, right?
Yeah, definitely. One thing on that note that I found has helped me a lot in the last couple of years is putting together sort of like an FAQs document, because I found myself at the end of a 12-hour day of coaching people, and then I'm going through Facebook messages from potential leads and stuff. The same questions kept coming up, and I was writing essays every time. I put it all into like a PDF document, jazzed it up, made it look sexy so I can ping it across. And then all of a sudden, like it's saving me half hour of my evening when I don't have to sort of type the whole thing up from scratch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also that, those questions that you get from your clients, the things that form your social, people are always like, oh, content, I don't know what to write about. As a PT, when I was a PT, content was easy because I just answered questions my clients asked. That's all I did. I'd get to the end, and I used to have a notebook in my pocket all the time. I used to take notes of any questions they had that I thought were relevant. And it'd be like this thing going off in my head. I'd be like, I'm going to write an article about that. I'm going to write about that. I'm going to tell everybody about that. And it was the same questions being asked all the time. And remember, that forms your social media content. It isn't just and this is why a lot of the time it's nice to, and obviously you guys with UK PTs, what you're doing is you're putting a lot of these commonly asked questions into an open forum. But people still, even for me, they DM me with these questions. I'm like, hold on. Put that question in the thread, please, and then other people can benefit from the answer, rather than me answering you personally. Because I'm not. There's nothing secret. I always remember one of my clients came up to me. I've told this story multiple times, so you may have heard it. But I remember one of my clients come up to me, and at the time, this is years ago, and one of my clients was like, she was getting lean, she was getting in shape, she was looking phenomenal. And I remember one of my other clients walking up to me and whispering in my ear and saying, "What's she doing?" As if it was like some secret. So I turned around and whispered back in there. I said, "What I tell her?" And it was, they thought there was some kind of secret that I was going to relinquish. And I was like, they just do what I tell them. And at the time, this is a long time ago, I was just coaching that other person badly. I was coaching the other person badly because I was trying to coach very, different people in a very similar way, which is, when you start in the industry, that's what people do. And you don't learn how to manage individuals. What you do is you run the same process with a bunch of people, and it's pot luck, like 2 out of 10 might succeed. And then you realize that, hold on, the other 8 aren't succeeding because of my coaching, not because of something they're doing. I'm not looking at their context. I'm not looking at their lifestyle. I'm not looking at the things that they want. I'm assuming they want what everybody else wants, right? And that's a massive mistake in the PT industry, and I've seen it for decades.
Quick thing, guys. We've got someone called Shane O'Neill who actually is going to come into the chat for 5-10 minutes and ask some questions.
Cool.
Ooh. So, Mark, he's actually ready to come in now.
Yeah, let him in.
Let's do it. He should be here. Where is he? There he is.
Here we go.
Hello,
Shane.
Oh, we can't hear you, Shane. You can still connect in the audio.
Still connecting to audio.
So just to fill you in, Phil, yesterday, Shane commented yesterday on the post when I was asking for questions for you, and he sort of said he would love to pick your brains about a few things, and I just messaged him and said, mate, can you be free at 12:30 tomorrow? He's like, yeah, why? I was like, well, I'll fucking bring you on and you can ask him yourself.
The joys of Zoom. The joys of Zoom.
I'm back. Sorry.
How are you doing, Shane? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Phil. Geez, you'd swear through this whole lockdown we would have gotten used to how to use Zoom, huh? Jesus.
You would have thought.
I'm loving the superhero paraphernalia everywhere. I think I've spotted about 8 movies already.
Yeah, all comic book geeky shit, no doubt. Yeah,
all sorts. Yeah, you'll enjoy the back shelf.
Oh, I noticed yours as well. Yeah, well, this is where I'm allowed to have this shit up, So
mine's been filtered down a bit. We're moving house in a week or so, so the shelves are actually empty around the edges. That's just the central bit that remains. But nevertheless, cool. So you had some questions.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Yeah, listen. First off, I just wanted to say, convey my gratitude and opportunity for this this opportunity. You know, thanks, Mark, for setting this up last night. And thanks for letting me jump on. And also, Phil, just before I get into a question, thanks just for being who you are and providing so much content to us as coaches in the industry and just in general. Just wanted to make sure that, you know, you're aware of the thanks that is. I'm very nervous here. Obviously, I'm modeling my words, but thanks for being you. Thanks for you doing you.
Massively appreciate that.
Brilliant. Okay, question. I'm a full-time online coach. And recently I've just niched down on my target audience that I want to really, really target and help. Okay. And my question is about pre-qualifying leads via social media content. So like,
okay,
how do I best go about that? You know, kind of vibe attracting your tribe and making sure that my content gets in front of the people that I want to work with and that want to work with me. How do I best go about that?
Probably first thing you need to consider is there's several terms for this, but need states, right? You know, how many people on your social media have the need for your services that you're delivering, right? And how do you identify that? So how are you going to identify the people that are looking for what you're ultimately doing, right? You know, is your content asking them the questions to research, you know, what they're after? You know, are you engaging with them where, you know, it might be a Q&A kind of scenario? Are you engaging them in conversations? Are you going potentially outside your social media into DMs to talk to them about what their needs are? And telling them about the solutions to the problems that they might have. You know, have you identified their challenges, their problems, which is all going to require listening, which is one of the points I made before to Josh. You know, we've always got to listen to what our potential prospects, clientele, whatever you want to call it, are having. And it requires interacting with your audience and more than anything, listening to what they're saying. You know, a lot of this you can also garner from other places. It doesn't have to be your social media. So as long as you know ultimately who you're trying to target, you can then look at where they reside. You know, so where else are they going to be? So if we're talking about, you know, I used to tell people to go on the Weight Watchers forum. You know, join up on the Weight Watchers forum, because ultimately it's almost like a stepping stone that people will go through. You know, they might join Weight Watchers because the comforting thing about Weight Watchers, people can eat the things they used to. People are surrounded by other people with the same kind of issues, so they feel more comfortable. So it's almost like it's this proving ground and this intermittent step for us to then pick these clients up, very much like these mass commercial gyms, you know, these budget gyms. They're stepping stones for people who could move into personal training. So, you know, I always say to the PT businesses when they start freaking out and having a meltdown because there's a big commercial budget gym just opening around the corner from them, I'm getting all excited and they're freaking out. I'm like, no, hold on. All these people are prospects. They're all people that are looking for your service, just maybe not at this moment. So there's loads of other places where we can find out what those questions are. And then our job really on social media is just to answer those questions. You know, very much similar to what I try to do with you guys, is that I try to look at what PTs need and what they want. What are the things they're struggling with? What are the things they can't manage time around? And we try and provision those services in one way or another. So we have the educational platform, we do all the assets, we do all those things. And the idea behind them is that we're doing something for the PT that they probably haven't got time to do themselves, but they need to deliver service. So what's your solution to those problems? And are they aware of not only the solutions, but also your methods to resolving those problems? You know, have you identified them, why maybe their previous experience? Because remember, most people have had a PT experience before, and most of the time it's been bad. So what makes you different? You're going to have to identify that, because the assumption is, and this is all, I talk a lot about this with things like pricing, is that when you look at pricing, if you price yourself on a par with everybody else, everybody assumes you deliver the same service. So how it then becomes a little bit more challenging to actually tell people that you're different and you're better. So a pricing model where you're the most expensive person, the assumption would instantly be, because it's how people look at pricing, the assumption would instantly be that you're better than those other people because you're more expensive. So then that begs people to ask questions and say, well, why are you different? Why are you better? And that qualifies you in that budget bracket. So you've got to have those in there, and you know, I'm probably going to drop a little bit of a kind of product plug to what we do here. But people struggle with food. We know that clients struggle with food. They struggle with the acquisition of food, the creation of it, the curation of it, and the skills needed ultimately to create it. So all of which become major factors in compliance and therefore results for your clients. You know, your client goes to prep for lunch or whatever it might be, or, you know, they have spaghetti bolognese on a Thursday night with their family. The issue is they don't know how to create it. They don't know what to pick from prep that's in alignment with their caloric goals. They don't know how to create a better, more nutrient dense, lower energy density version of that spaghetti bolognese. So it's your job as a coach to provision that. You go, right, here you go. You eat spaghetti bolognese every Thursday night. We've identified that from the food logs that you've given me, and it's a habitual thing. So rather than trying to change your habit and trying to change not only your habit, but the habit of your entire family and something you do as a family, what we're going to do is going to make it better than it was before. Because ultimately, when we look at weight loss, we're not trying to get someone to go to, you know, to all of a sudden eating, you know, fish and broccoli every 5 minutes. What we're doing is we're going, right, if we can save some calories in every single meal that you're eating and increase your output, we're winning. You know, it's that simple. So perhaps they genuinely don't know how to do something like make scrambled eggs. So if you provision with them tools without being a little bit, patronizing, so to speak, you know, you don't want to go to someone, I put an information sheet as to how to create scrambled eggs for you, and they go, well, I'm a qualified chef or whatever it might be. You're going to look a bit of an idiot. But all these things, every single one of these need states is serviceable. And as a PT business, remember, you've got the core base of what you service. You need to be there on time. You need to teach them how to perform and execute exercises in an efficient and safe manner. You need to understand progression and regression of those movements. And that's pretty much what you're qualified to do. And that's pretty much what a PT service is. And then outside of that, you've got to think outside the box. And it depends on where your location is, what the demands are. You know, I was based in Mayfair. So you know, when I finished my career, I was based in Mayfair. So often budget was very, very high for these people. So one of the services that I provisioned is that if they wanted a chef, I'd find them a chef. You know, so I used to find chefs for my clients because they had the budget to do that. And then I'd work with the chef to actually provide the food for them. And when they were going to stay in hotels, part of that service that I provisioned is I'd contact the hotel and I'd tell the hotel what their dietary requirements were. You know, so it's understanding the needs of your audience. And again, that becomes that pre-qualification is they're there for a reason. I'd like to think that the vast majority of people on my Instagram are there for a reason, because I fulfill a need or I present value to them. I'm not bothered about huge numbers and blah, blah, blah. You know, if I want to go on there, and not that my ass would probably pull many numbers, but you know what I mean? I'm not fussed about numbers. I'm fussed about the quality of the people that are there, which is what, you know, qualifying leads are. It also kind of dictates who you retarget from a financial perspective. So you need to understand your geography, particularly with one-to-one coaching. Online coaching is a different ballpark, because all of a sudden that geography thing goes out the window, right? You don't need to worry about people in your geographical location. And a lot of one-on-one coaches are still using social media as a tool to garner clients, but forgetting that 90% of their, probably more to be fair, of their social media actually live outside of the catchment area. Yeah. So social media probably isn't where you want to be spending most of your time, because you're not going to find a lot of clients on social media, because not only is it down to the 10% of your audience, which if you've only got 2,000 people, it's only 200 people potentially. Out of those 200 people, if they're following you from a personal training perspective, chances are they might already have a personal trainer, which means you're now down to maybe 50% of that. Then some of them can't afford you. Then you're down to, and ultimately you're spending all this time on social media for 10 prospects, you know, and it just becomes that whole muted thing. So you need to find out what people want, what they're willing to pay for your services, what your services are. Obviously, I'm like a service menu of what people will get, what makes your service better and than anybody else is at a similar price point, and also what makes you trump them. And the rest is, and the biggest challenge really is telling people about it. You know, and I put up a post a couple of weeks ago, kind of a tongue-in-cheek, jokey one about Boris Johnson. What is it? It was Boris Johnson. Yeah, no, I was thinking Donald Trump, Boris Johnson. I get them confused. But Boris Johnson, and I think it got something like 600 plus profile visits, about 35,000 reach. And I put up an organic post a couple of days ago about a service that we provide, and you know, just because the limitations of Instagram and Facebook, obviously, you know, very much the same thing now. It reached, I think, 6,000 people in total, and we got 35 profile visits. That was it. You know, so if you want to play with those kind of things, you know, you've got to think about stories. Stories are a great place to tell people about your services. Video is a great medium, because again, it bypasses a lot of the algorithms and things like this. And of course, paying for that increased exposure on social. But first thing to do is to make sure you know who your audience are, what they're looking for, and how you can service that need. And that therein pre-qualifies them. You know, you've got people who are following you for the reasons that you were fulfilling their need states, be it in a very subtle and free way to start with. You know, you might be giving them recipes. You give them free recipes, you know, and then ultimately you turn around and then you charge them for it. It's a bit like PT. You know, you give people loads of advice about how to train and all these different things. Ultimately, you're pre-qualifying them. They just might not be ready at that particular point to engage in your services, but they need to be aware that those services exist. Because remember, your exposure on social media is going to be way higher for information than it is for telling people what your services are, because they'll lock that shit down. Yeah. That makes sense?
It really does. There's so much value in that. And honestly, I can't wait to re-listen to this podcast again, because everything you touched on, so many things that were so valuable. Do I have time to
Yeah, of course. If you've got a follow-up, Shane, fire away.
Amazing. Okay. So the one thing you mentioned there, Phil, about establishing the need point, perhaps I can specify a little bit. My thing is Fat Daddy Fitness. That's the niche I'm targeting down.
Okay,
so I'm
cool.
Yeah, so that, like, it's kind of geeky. So dads grew up in the 80s and 90s, are a little bit, let's say, overweight and feel bad about that. And I want to establish some kind of a way to enhance their ability to be better fucking dads by helping them feel better about their weight.
Yeah.
Maybe
I like it.
a few pounds. Yeah, me too. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a lot of content out there in like sharing in a few of the dad groups and stuff like stories, videos. I have recipe videos and kind of infotainment kind of stuff, like kind of entertaining, kind of, that's the kind of thing I'm going for. But what you said there about finding the need state, like finding where they are and what they need. Would you say that I'd be better off going into like Facebook groups that have dads in it and just start talking to them, or start DMing, doing the whole, sliding into DMs thing? Or I am limited with social media, but yeah,
probably groups and things like this. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be having conversations with these people. I mean, what's your age demographic? I'm assuming you said about 80s, so you're talking dads in probably late 20s to what early 50s maybe.
Yeah,
maybe
at a stretch,
that wider scope. So that wider scope. So you've got to be thinking about what generation. There's generational differences. We've got to understand generational differences. So we've got to understand, if you were born in the 80s, what are the things that you did that somebody born in the 60s didn't do, and what did somebody in for example, like millennials, right? Millennials, we know the vast majority of millennials can't cook. They've never been taught to cook. They've never been shown how to cook. They don't, so the vast majority of food that they'll ever acquire, they'll buy. So they need to understand what it is they're buying. They don't need to understand how to prepare food, because that's a massive task to teach them how to cook. Obviously, within a closed environment. So if you're doing one-on-one coaching, it might be a good idea to do a workshop or something like that for your clients on how do you prep food. It could be a good workshop, but you get a professional in who would, service that need and whatever it might be. And you've got to understand their psyche. You've got to understand the questions they're asking, the struggles they have. And obviously, from a male perspective, you've got to think about the percentage of them that are doing the things that you would maybe assume they're doing. Me and my wife, we shared kind of the cooking. We both cook. We both enjoy cooking, and we both share that cooking. But that dynamic won't always exist. In some cases, the dad might be doing all the cooking. In some cases, the wife might be doing all the cooking. The mum might be doing all the cooking. So we've got to understand, who you're targeting, and you've got these multiples of people. So what I would do, I would look to create probably 4 to 5 avatars of the types of guys that you're dealing with in that age demographic. And you've got to probably have a little bit of differentials between the ones at the lower end of the age spectrum. And remember, it's not an age thing. It's a mindset thing. It's a stage of life thing. And remember, having kids, all of a sudden your environment gets altered and you don't have as much free time as you used to. Because I know guys in their 30s and 40s who just have loads of free time and they just train all the time. They're in great shape. They don't have the challenges that the person that probably you're targeting does. So you need to understand what those challenges are. And yeah, I'd jump into different Facebook groups. I'd talk to people in your local area. Obviously, right now, that's a real challenge. But, converse with these people, find out where they're all residing. And it's no different to PT. If you're dealing with a weight loss population, one of the best places you can go is to Slimming World, Weight Watchers, read about on those forums, because that's your social media content. These people are asking questions that our industry would actually mock them for. they'd turn around and they'd take the piss out of them for asking the question. They go, "Are you stupid or what?" They wouldn't ask the question if they didn't know the answer. You know, if they knew the answer, they wouldn't ask the question, right? So we've got to treat them with that same kind of respect. And, you know, I remember one of our infographics packages, we sent a thing out about how to cook eggs. And somebody emailed us and complained about it and said, you know, my clients know how to cook eggs. I said, do you know that for a fact? He said, well, no, actually, no, I don't. I said, I cook, but every time I go to cook an egg, particularly boiling an egg, I have to reference the internet because I can never remember how long it is, you know? So we've got to think about those things. What are the tools that are useful for them? You know, are they getting up in the morning and rushing around trying to make breakfast for the kids? Maybe they need options for fast breakfast for the kids so they've got more time for themselves. All of these different things. And there's so many ways that you can service those needs. And it's phenomenal that you've got this little niche and you know who they are. You just need to understand who they are now. I would imagine that, you know, you've probably gone to that first step of going, I know who they are, but fully understanding what they do. Because remember, their mindset won't be the same as you because of your background. You know, you've probably came, and again, I'm making assumptions here, Shane, but you probably came from a fitness background. Fitness has probably played a massive role in your life for a long time. With some of these guys, they won't be even, you know, they might only be taking up some kind of activity when they're in their 30s or 40s. So we've got to beg all those questions. We've got to ask those questions and, you know, find out wherever you can. But there's plenty of resources. I mean, the internet's a great thing for that. You know, we can find resources to where they're all hanging out, what they're talking about, you know, the kind of things that worry them, the kind of things that stress them. Are they okay with the kind of proverbial dad bod? Are they okay with that? Or is that something that really frustrates them or infuriates them? You know, some people as they get older, they're less, you know, they're less worried about what other people think. They're less worried about what social media tells them. They're less worried about, you know, being this perfect, you know, version of, you know, physical version of a man that, you know, we're meant to be. So they become more relaxed about it. So they're not paranoid about the diet. They're not paranoid about the training anymore. But there's different people in that demographic. And you need to understand them.
Phil, would there be any value in Shane doing sort of like a talk or a presentation or something to appeal to the, rather than going into lots of other people's groups, to almost create his own group of followers, as it were? I sort of, to put some context on it, I used to advertise and do like free weight loss seminars within my community. Started off probably 30, 40 people would come along and I'd talk for an hour and a half about losing weight. But then out of those 30 or 40, I'd always pick up another couple of members. And then 2 or 3 months later, when I did it, I'd get 50 or 60 people, then 70, 80 people. And it was sort of like quite an easy way of generating leads, but for the specific audience that I was trying to target, people who live near me that wanted to lose weight. But I suppose if Shane's working online, it'd be easy to do something like that virtually so people could log in from anywhere. I might be wrong, but
yeah, 100%. No, I think it's actually a larger challenge, Mark, when you do it online, because, you know, you only need so many clients, right? Whether you're online or whether you're face to face, you know, there's only a certain number of clients that you're going to need and that you need to curate your services, and you can only manage so many people. So, you know, in your closed area there, Shane, there might be an opportunity there to actually find these people. I mean, what's the kind of demography like? Is it, you know, is it a wealthy area that you're based in? Is it a, you know, middle of the road? Is it a low income area? I mean, you know, questions like that are very relevant, because, you know, if you've got a low income area, people are looking for groups. They're looking for, you know, all the you know, almost like boot camp style stuff. You know, one-on-one coaching is kind of pointless in those areas, you know, to some degree, because there's very few people want them and very few people can afford them. So, you know, your boot camp and your group stuff is phenomenal because people want community. They want to be recognized for something. They want to be part of something which you're creating. You know, I know several boot camps I've consulted with in the past, and, you know, things like secondary spend, things like getting T-shirts printed. All of a sudden, everybody's proud of wearing these T-shirts, so there's a spend for it. You know, I remember, you know, when I worked in Mayfair, if I got some T-shirts printed, there's no way on this planet any of my clients are going to wear them. You know, because they don't need that affinity. They don't need to belong to this commercial thing and this group. So it's those kind of things. But if you can get a group of these kind of guys with the same mentality, same mindset, same stage in life, same challenges, all of a sudden that's a massively powerful thing. And yeah, Mark, I completely agree with what you're saying, is that, you know, if you can get those people in through the door, and I would do it almost like an invite. You know, I'd be keen in your area, Shane, to be going around, finding out where these guys reside and just give them a card and say, look, I want to invite you down to, we're doing this thing and this is who it's for and this is you, you know, and you know, get them all together and start something, you know, start a little tribe of people and start a little group and a community of people. And it's much easier in a local area than it actually is online. You know, people would generally think it's the other way around, but it is actually much easier because you can find those people and specify who they are.
Cool. Anything else, Shane?
Oh well, yeah, absolutely. Do I have time? Do I have time to ask a little?
If you've got another question, fire away.
All right, one more, just one. And so far the value has been immense here, guys. Really, really incredible. That's a brilliant idea as well, Mark. I'm really looking forward to expanding on that. A lot of what you put out, Phil, is about, and I really, really resonate with this about the non-compliant client. And I think a measure of a coach is measured by how valuable their coaching is to the non-compliant client. And one of the things you said in one of your videos was sitting on the high horse of motivational memes and speeches, as a lot of coaches do. And they kind of, they barrel down the phone of like, you need to fucking do this because this is what's expected. This is the behavior that's necessary to achieve this fucking goal, with no really understanding of where the client is and what they're going through and all the rest. What do you do, if I can be so bold, what do you do with your clients, or did you do with your clients that were non-compliant? How did you get off that fucking horse and say, right, how are we going to do this? How do we move forward?
Well, again, this is understanding the demography of my clients, if you know, so to speak. It's kind of demography is a wider sort of scope, but understanding the individual needs, right? And there should never really be, in my view, there should never be, you know, group stuff, team stuff. I'm dealing with professional athletes, slightly different, because at the end of the day, you know, there's going to be a lot of sucking it up if I'm dealing with a professional athlete, you know, because when they stamp their feet and say, I don't want to do that, they don't really have a choice if they want to make it in the realm that they're trying to make it. You know, we don't deal with those kind of people as a general rule, right? You know, the things that we're eliciting changing are things that, yes, they're going to change somebody's life, but they're not, you know, like the movie analogy I've used before, where, you know, if I'm dealing with a film star or a movie star and they have to be in a certain shape by a certain time to fulfill this role, and that could be like a life-changing event for them. You know, it could propel them into the stratosphere of famous actors or whatever it might be. And that is defined a lot by the way they look, right? So I'm going to do whatever it takes in those scenarios. But the resultant output that they get is they're going to get paid a huge amount of money. It's going to be a career-defining thing, which could have essentially set them and their families up for life. The average person we deal with, when they lose weight, not a lot changes. They're not going to get paid. It's not going to be life-changing. It's going to change their mentality. It's going to change their approach around a lot of things. And it's going to move them into a different stage of their life, more than likely. And people forget about this. It's like, you know, overweight people. Overweight people, you know, they sabotage their own efforts a lot of the time because they don't like the thought of what's at the end of the tunnel, especially when they're a little bit older. Because remember, these people have been overweight for 10, 15 years. So their friendship circles revolve around, you know, their habits and behaviors as an overweight person. So there'll be people they eat with, there'll be people they drink with, there'll be people they socialize with. Now, all of a sudden, they're not going to do that with these people anymore. And that's a massive, massive factor. You've got to realize that, you know, and anybody who's experienced this, you ask any clients who've lost weight or got in great shape, whatever it might be, their friends just drop like flies. And all of a sudden, they have this different social circle. It's a bit like what they say in business, right? If you want to succeed in business, a lot of the time, you need to surround yourself with people who are more successful than you, or people who have a mindset. If you've got people with a negative mindset, move them to one side. And life's like that. It's harsh. You know, you've got to be almost brutal about who you hang around with. You know, I've got friends in the past who I'll go for a drink with and I'll have a bite of lunch with, but I'm not going to entertain them for huge amounts of time because we're on a different page. We're on a completely different page, and their mindset doesn't conform with my mindset, and that doesn't work. You know, you walk away from those conversations just feeling flat as a pancake and you know, unhelpful. So going back to the point is, it's about knowing what stage of life they're in. It's about knowing their challenges as an individual. So, you know, you stamping your feet and going, you've got to do this. Really, you should be asking, why can't you do this? You know, what are your reasons and what are your rationale behind doing this? Well, you know, I struggle with time at that particular point of the day. Right. So let's find a solution to that. You know, and it's about finding solutions and problems all the time. And The biggest challenge probably as PTs we have is the fact that people aren't open and honest with us because they don't trust us to start with. And if somebody doesn't trust you, they won't tell you the full picture. They'll only tell you part of it. So they'll go, yeah, it's like that whole thing where you see a client and, what will you do for weight loss? I'll do anything. I'll do anything. I'll do absolutely anything for weight loss. And then really you write this list down of, will you do this? Will you do this? Will you do this? And I could just, what I often used to do is I used to write this unrealistic list in front of them. I go, all I want you to do is tell me yes or no. Would you do that? Would you do that? Would you do that? Would you do that? And then 5 questions in, I'm asking them that, your notion that you'll do anything it takes is wrong because you won't. You like the thought of the outcome. You like the thought of the outcome. And what we've got to do is we've got to move you towards that in relative and easy steps. And that enables them to understand it straight away because they've answered the questions for themselves. I never answer a question, and I try desperately not to do this with a client, never answer the question for them, always get them to answer the question for themselves. So when you're consulting with a client, I'm getting them to answer the questions, not me. And if I'm asking them to do something, depending on their mentality and depending on their psyche, is that if I've got somebody who's overweight, who's failed at losing weight multiples of times, I'm not going to ask them to do it for themselves because they won't. Because they're too, there's almost this level of self-hatred about themselves and the way they look. So they won't do it for themselves, but they'll do it for me. So I'm like, can you do that for me? So now all of a sudden they're accountable to me, not themselves. And it's understanding the mentality of the people that you're dealing with. And some people, you can make them accountable to themselves and they're cool. Other people, you've got to make them accountable to somebody else. If they've got kids, if they've got family, a lot of people, you talk about your demographic, the men, right? All of a sudden, mortality becomes an issue. All the years that I was single bloke and, I was racing motorbikes. I was driving fast cars. I was playing, these ridiculous sports. Mortality never came into my mind. I never thought about, what if. But now with kids and family, I'm like, there is a big what if, and all of a sudden, like life insurance becomes a thing. It's like, I didn't need to worry about that before, So now all of a sudden the mentality changes, right? There's this massive shift in mindset. You got to remember is that most men that you're probably targeting, and this is your demographic we're talking about, are doing things for other people, not for themselves. If you've got a family and you've got a bunch of kids and you're still doing shit for yourself, your mindset's all wrong. If everything you do is all about, I'm saving money to, buy myself this. I'm doing this to benefit me. I'm doing this all of a sudden everything is there to benefit others. And you've got to remember that is that you've got to consider if you're going to do the sector that you're talking about, the niche that you're talking about, you've got to consider everybody else in their world, all the kids, all the family, their wife, their times, their school pickup times. You've got to consider all that shit. And if you don't consider it, that therefore renders you not necessarily a bad coach, but an inconsiderate coach. Considerate coaching is, it's a friend of mine, Brett Bartholomew, he actually wrote a book about considerate coaching, but he was talking about elite performance. And that term, considerate coaching, resonates with me massively. You need to be considerate as a coach. And if you're considerate about what your client needs are, you'll get there. And there should never be a state where, like you've said, Shane, there should never be a state where you're standing on top of your pedestal going, you've got to do this and you should do this. You don't take it seriously enough. And you hear it so many times. And I hear this with this old bodybuilding community where they're like, they just don't want it enough. I'm like, bullshit, you're a crap coach. It's not about them not wanting it enough. It's the fact that you're a crap coach. And all you're doing is highlighting the fact. You're saying, oh, my client doesn't want it enough. I can't get results with this person. No, you can't get results with that person because you're giving them the wrong formula. Your goal and role as a coach is to find the right formula. And if you get it wrong a few times, that's okay, because that's part of coaching. But if you continuously get it wrong and then just give up on that person, and don't get me wrong, there's certain clients that you won't be able to openly communicate with, because they're just not your type of person or whatever it might be. And I'd always be very honest with people that I'd turn around and say to them, look, I can't work with you because you want something that I can't offer. And that happened very, very rarely, but it happened a few times. And, my other coaches were like, what? You just told them? Yeah, that's what I told them. I said, I can't work with you. I said, we're not suited. We're incompatible. What I say, you don't make sense of. So it doesn't work. So often I say to clients when they're looking for coaches, you need to find someone you can communicate with, because if you can't communicate with them, you've lost already. So communication, the skill of communication is a massive thing. And obviously I touched on it earlier with Josh when we had the fast questions, is that communication is a massive, massive thing. Does that answer your question? Or did I go completely off on tangent there?
Both. You answered the question, and when you went off on tangent, you brought amazing value. That was cool. Fantastic. Specifically, the thing you said there. Just trying to run through it now in my head. The thing you said about it not being about dads, not doing it about them. They're not doing it for themselves, because if they're good dads, it's not about them. It's about how it impacts their kids and longevity of life and being around. That was, that was
massively. But remember as well is that you're trying to help them become better dads. So some of that shit they'll be getting wrong. Yeah. And you know, nobody's ever in a position where I'm saying I do this better than you or you do this better than me. But all the time, you know, being a dad is about learning all the time, and you'll get shit wrong. You'll be engrossed, you know, and I'm guilty of this, being engrossed in my phone and not paying attention and missing things. And as a coach, that's part of your role. And obviously, if you're going to go into the realms that you're talking about, you're going to have to go beyond what a personal trainer would do. You're talking about coaching, you know, people in realms where, and there's going to be certain things in there that are going to be way out of your remit. So you will need psychologists. You're going to need people, have people that, and that's how you need consultants who work on.
I think the idea works. Your idea worked, yeah. Thank you so much, lads. Thank you so much. It was fantastic.
No problem.
Thanks for coming out. Fantastic. All right. I'll just thanks, guys.
Yeah, I was superhero stuff, so I just went and I might change love as well.
I got a load of Masters of the Universe there now. That resides on this though, which I'm going to have to show you. Universe figure signed by the 4 Horn. 99, no idea what I'm talking about.
Best. Was the first film that I ever went to see at cinema. Like you talking about like 86 or something like that. Yeah, and I've just ordered an original cinema poster for it. To get framed up and stick up somewhere. I'm just waiting for it to arrive at customs.
That's awesome. They've got, I think the prop store are doing a big movie memorabilia sale in the next couple of weeks for anybody who's looking for movie memorabilia. I've got rolls of movie posters. I love them.
Yeah, I'm a geek with stuff like that. But I'm the same as Shane. The only place I'm allowed to have it is in my little man cave. Not allowed anywhere else in the house. Never mind. No, Phil, there's one more question that popped up in the Pure Gym group, and I might as well ask it because we give the people what they want. From Colm Moran, I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. He has said he would like to know about some strategies for taking on clients during COVID, especially with regards to when people are reluctant to sign up to long-term one-to-one sessions.
Just run that by me again, that question.
Strategies for taking on clients during the current COVID circumstances, specifically relating to the fact that people might be reluctant to sign up to long-term contracts.
Right. So I'm guessing what he means by taking on is acquiring, yes?
Yeah, let's assume that, yeah.
Right. So it's kind of some of the stuff we've already talked about. It's very similar in that notion that if you're trying to acquire clients, or you're trying to get them, you know, it's that line of communication, right? If you're in a gym, it's the same thing. Is that, you know, and I talk about this a million times and people still don't do it, is that the best way that you can pick up clients in the gym is get yourself known. And I don't mean get yourself known as in the dude who, you know, walks around with his arms out all the time or whatever it might be. It's get known. Now, the way you get known in society of old was you would introduce yourself to people and you'd say hello. And you'd tell them a little bit about yourself, and they would in turn probably tell you a little bit about them, or you'd find out things about them by having a nice line of questioning, right? So nobody's ever going to sign up to a service with anybody in any field unless they know that person or know something about that person, right? You know, especially when they're asking for reasonable amounts of money. You know, you're going to need to know something about them, whether they actually give a shit. You know, and that's always a thing in gyms, is that if you're going to introduce yourself to these people, you've then got to try and help them somehow. And that doesn't involve saying, you know, I'm only going to help you if you pay. You know, you can walk around the gym and go, right, I'm going to, and a lot of that is, again, communication skills, soft skills, being able to approach someone without, again, patronizing them. And, you know, coaches would often see it as this thing where they'd walk up to someone, tap them on the shoulder, go, "You're doing that all wrong." And I'm like, you know, and you wonder why the response isn't favorable. You know, can I make some suggestions? You know, it's simple lines like that where you go up to someone and go, "Look, can I make some suggestions about your deadlift?" Rather than going over it and like, "Oh my God, you're doing that so badly, you're going to wreck your back." Nobody wants to hear that shit, you know, but you'd be amazed how many times people do it. And then the PTs are like, "Well, I approach all these people in the gym and nobody ever responds, and they don't like the way I come up to them." I mean, they're doing it wrong. So I go over and tell them, "So you're doing that wrong." You know, irrespective of whether someone's doing something wrong, nobody wants to be belittled. Nobody wants to feel inferior. Nobody wants to feel insecure about what they're doing. And remember, a lot of people who walk into gyms, when they walk into a gym, they already feel insecure about being there. Whether they appear to be confident or they're not. If it's not their normal domain, they will feel, you know, unsure and insecure about what they're doing. Now, online stuff is very, very similar. You've got to make people feel comfortable. So, you know, whether you're going through social, whether you're going through newsletter, whether you know, you've got to have a line of communication. And that's typically either as social media or it's typically a newsletter, particularly online, right? So in those two lines of communication, you've got to do several things. You've got to introduce yourself. You've got to tell people a little bit about yourself without being all about me. You've then got to, you know, look at the need states. You've got to look at the services, all the things that we talked about before, and you've got to start ticking those boxes for free, right? It isn't, "I'm a PT, I provide these services, blah, blah, blah." It's, here's a bunch of stuff that's going to help you nutritionally or, you know, with your training or tips and hints and whatever it might be. This is all free, but I also do it paid as well. And then you want people to look at that stuff and go, "Hold on, whoa, if the free stuff's that good, you imagine what the paid stuff's like." And that's kind of where you've always got to be pushing people towards. And your social media content has got to be that good. And there's this thing where people are like, you know, it's almost like they keep these little things in the background and they go, "Right, I'm not going to tell you about that because that's my paid stuff. And I'll tell you about this because this is my cheap and my free stuff." I'm like, "I'll tell you about anything if you ask me the right question. I don't care. I'll tell you stuff that's in the paid academy. I'll tell you stuff that's in documents that we send. I'll help you out with, you know, creating your own stuff, you know, even if it's stuff that we do." You know, people are like, "How do I go about doing this?" I'm like, "Well, what you need to do is blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, we actually do that for you. And if you know, want to save a bit of time and a bit of money, we actually have that service. Because again, I understand the need of you and that's what you want. And we're providing it to you. And that's ultimately how my business works. But it's also how ultimately you're going to go about acquiring clients. You've got to give them something. You've got to give them value. And, you know, the likes of like Gary Vee and all those guys are always talking about give value. But you need to be specific about what that value is. There's no point in, you know, putting up a workout, "Oh, this is my workout today." I'm like, yeah, it might get yourself, you know, it might get a couple of thousand likes, but what value does that give your client or your prospective client? So you've got to think about those things and you've got to get that and relay and you've got to communicate it. And again, like I said before, the challenge with social media is that reach and things like this is a struggle. But if you've got 1,000 people on your social media, you've got 500 people on your social media, all you need is 10 people. Oh, I've just lost my camera for some reason. Bear with me 1 second.
I'm still here, yeah.
It's all right. The sound's still coming through. Let me just flip my camera back on and off. It might flip cameras just a little bit here. It's probably my camera overheating because we've been on. All right, we're back. Let me just zoom in a bit here because I did have my desk all tidy, just a bit you could see. That's how it works. Honestly, I'm moving. It's an absolute shit tape around me. And yeah, so where was I? Till we lost it. Yeah, so again, it's the same thing. It's added value, but ultimately, as a coach, and I talk about this with one-on-one coaching, as a one-on-one coach, you need probably 10 to 15 clients. That's it. If you've got 10 to 15 clients, you're laughing. You obviously need a waiting list of people because if somebody drops out or somebody goes on holiday or whatever it might be, you need someone to fill that slot. But ultimately, you need 10 to 15 clients. That's not a lot of people, you know, and you're freaking out because you don't have, you know, 100,000 people on your social media. Like, you need 10 clients to make a living. That's all. That's all you need. If they're doing 3 sessions a week, wow, you're more than busy enough. Then you've got online stuff. Same thing. You probably need, you know, depending on what you're charging, anywhere between, you know, 10 to 100 clients, depending on what you're charging, what the services you're offering. Again, not a massive amount of people. You know, we have, I think, well, our most recent service, we have around about 6,500 people subscribe to it. you know, and there'll probably be another 2,000 or 3,000 who haven't quite decided it's for them. And they'll come on board as other people perhaps drop out, or they'll join the group or whatever it might be. But they're actively paying for a service that we offer. You know, and you need 10 to 100 people. It's not a great deal. So relay that value, give them loads of stuff for free, make sure they're well and truly informed that you also do paid stuff, and make sure they know what your services are. Again, there's not a lot of clarity with that. I'm a qualified PT. What does that mean? You know, I'm a qualified PT. Great. So you've got to take me in the gym. You've got to beast shit on me, and I'm going to go home and not be able to walk for 3 days. Wonderful. Can't wait to pay for that. Like, you need to be specific what your services are. You need to tell people, look, I'm going to look after this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to manage this. And often, if you do that for 5 clients, they'll tell all their friends about it because it's amazing. And there you go. You're full now. And that's how my business started. You know, I haven't worked at a PT facility and not had a waiting list since I started at my career. You know, nearly 25 plus years ago. And the main reason for that is communication. And everything I got was word of mouth. I mean, you're quite happy to go back on my Facebook, on my social media, and I've told loads of people, more than happy to do that. Go and find me an advert for my personal training services. Go and find me one. Never did one. Never once did an ad for my personal training services on any platform, because I never needed to. But I was very fortunate in that my personal training services, my price point went up and up and up and up and up. A lot of people, depending on where their location is, they can't do that. You know, so if you're stuck in somewhere where, you know, nobody's ever going to pay £150 for a personal training session, you're stumped. At which point you've got to then decide on quality life versus income and what else you need to do. So you might need to go into online coaching then. I never had to go into online coaching because I used to charge a lot of money for one-on-one stuff.
Cool. Phil, there's a post that I found of yours from a few weeks back where you talk about crucial skills for a personal trainer, and then you go through communication, progressions, regressions, punctuality, and business acumen. It'd be fair to say communication has come up probably a dozen or so times throughout the last 40 minutes or so, and we've pretty much nailed that and highlighted the importance of it. But would you mind just expanding a little bit on the other 3 for me? For someone who's maybe in their first couple of years in the industry, what sort of bullet points would go under each of those brackets? So progressions, regressions, punctuality, business acumen. What should they be looking to obtain in terms of new information? And do you have any resources that would be good for them to get cracking with?
Yes, I do, Mark. Yes, I do. Right, progressions and regressions is fairly simple. Something that isn't often taught, or if it is, it's very loosely taught, and they don't actually explain that's what they're teaching in PT qualifications, is your ability to take a complex movement like a squat, for example, and being able to regress it or move it on. So how do you progress a squat? Squat progression typically stems around things like load and volume and blah, blah, blah. And then you start to get into it because once the squat movement pattern is mastered. So we're typically looking at regressions there. So if somebody can't do a squat, what typically happens in the PT world is people then persist at trying to fix the squat. But they try and fix the squat by squatting. They don't understand that there's a series of progressions that will move from a point, a simple point, all the way up to a squat, which is a complex movement. So as a coach, you've got to learn what those are. You need to learn what the mechanics are behind the movement and understand how to go into it. Now, most PT courses, they'll teach you how to do squat and deadlift. They don't teach you about regressions, particularly. Progressions, you're probably not going to be needing too much of. But obviously, when you start to go into regressions, you therefore, by default, learn progressions as well, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the progression from a perfectly mastered squat, you can't really go far. But when you're talking about progressions, we're normally talking about how do you take someone from doing a step up? What's the progression of a step up? And the purpose with respect to navigating someone towards doing a back squat. So it's going back and learning what those progressions and regressions are and knowing where someone should be. So a lot of your clients that are probably back squatting now and deadlifting now shouldn't be doing them. They should be doing other movements that will ultimately culminate in them doing a deadlift and a squat. It's like pull-ups, right? People are like, I want to do a pull-up. So they throw somebody on the bar, go, give it a go. Can't do one. We'll give it a go next week. They chuck them on a bar. They try and do it again. Try and do it again. But there's a bunch of things that will culminate in somebody being able to do a pull-up. A lot of complementary assisted movements and blah, blah, blah. And coming from a world of powerlifting, they call all these things assisted movements. So assisted movements are ones that will help you with, and typically most of them are actually regressions of the main movement. Mm-hmm. So with a squat, you figure out from someone's squat where the break point is. Is it the hips are rising too early? Is it the back's flexing? So then from that, you find out what the weak points are. So you go away and you start doing all the work around that weak point. I stopped deadlifting for a large period of time, and I just worked on my mid back because that was where my problem was. I couldn't stabilize my mid back, and what was happening is my spine was flexing at about the mid shin point. My back was starting to flex once I got past a certain load. So I was like, right, so I need to work on these muscles. So I went away, worked on these muscles, didn't deadlift, came back, added 10 kilos to my deadlift, and I hadn't deadlifted in 6 months. And that's how strong and how powerful progressions and regressions can be, and at all levels. Mm-hmm. So it's understanding those movements. So go back, get online. You're going to be able to find this information online and understand what those progressions and regressions are. Punctuality. My OP teacher, who I have a huge amount of respect for, sadly passed away. But one of his phrases and one of the things he had pinned above the PE door was punctuality is an essential virtue. There is no excuse. Well, there is an excuse. I tell a lie. There is an excuse for being late. Circumstances that are out of your control. That happens. Shit happens. People are late for things. But, repeatedly rolling up late and being casual about it, like, it's just what it is. If you're charging, let's say somebody's charging £60 an hour. Every 10 minutes that you're late, it's costing your client 10 quid, right? Easy maths, right? But you'll roll in 10 minutes late and there's no apology, there's no rationale, and you do it on a reasonably frequent basis, And if your client's very business-led, they'll probably work that out in their head and go, their tardiness is costing me £5-10 a time. If I turned around to the PT and said, I want you to give me that £5 or £10 back, they'd be like, no way. Like, don't steal my time. Don't steal your client's time. If you do, apologize or give them a free session. Do something. Anytime that I was ever late, I would either tag that time onto the end of the session if I had time to do that, or an opportunity to do that. If it didn't, I would either give them a free session, because that's my fault, or it's a fault that was caused by something in my world, not theirs. And then I would expect the favor to be the other way around. If they had to cancel late, they always pay their cancellation fees. Mm-hmm. They always pay them. I used to have clients who go, make sure you charge me because I was late. I was the one that got caught in traffic, but that shouldn't impact your life or your ability to pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. And you get that mutual respect. Rolling up late, there is no excuse for. There isn't.
When I worked at Sheffield United, there was a saying, might have been written up somewhere, or it's just sort of like the culture of the place was that 10 minutes early is on time is late is unforgivable. And it was so everything, even if you've got like a meeting at 10 o'clock, if you weren't there 10 minutes early, you were seen as late, and nobody wanted to be the person who walked in at 1 minute to 10 when everybody else was sat there.
Yeah. And it was a culture, right? They created this culture.
Yeah.
They create this culture, and then anybody who turns up late feels really uncomfortable. Now, there's another side to that, and this is something that I've learned over the years, and again, a bit of a tangent, but is that I used to get myself really worked up if I was going to be late for something when I first moved to London. Because outside of London, I was always in control of my own time. If I was late, it's because I got out of bed late, or I navigated traffic properly, or whatever. It was normally my fault. When I moved to London, all of a sudden, tubes were getting cancelled, buses were getting cancelled, whatever it might be. There was all this stuff out of my control. And what I used to do is I used to have this proper minor mental breakdown every time I was late for something, because I hated it. I hated being late because it had been ingrained in me so many times about tardiness and punctuality. And I've actually learned to not freak out about that. Just make sure that when I get there, I apologize in a cordial fashion. They understand. Sorry, my camera's gone off again for some reason. It's not liking this long video. It's all right, I'll just flip it back on again. So yeah, it just became this thing where, and then stress is no good to anybody. So I learned to manage that stress aspect of being late. But again, there's still no excuse for being late. That isn't something that I would then condone. I'm not condoning it by any means. What I'm saying is that getting stressed about it wasn't helping anybody. And I used to say the same to my clients. My clients coming up flustered and sweating, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, calm down. I said, look, it's not your fault. It happens. You know,
and just bend over backwards to make up for it.
Make it right. You know, as a PT, if you do something wrong, make it right. Make it right and go above and beyond making it right. Because that creates loyalty. You know, clients, that creates loyalty. You know, again, product plug, right? We're doing these Christmas cards, you know, and there's a reason we're doing Christmas cards, because that is about client loyalty. It's about, you know, you doing something for your clients that most people would not do. And that's a massive, massive thing. You know, something so simple that so many businesses forget about. And long before we were doing, you know, Christmas cards, I would tell coaches, send your clients Christmas cards. If you have a very small coaching, buy them presents. I used to buy boxes of, you know, stuff to give all of my clients. You know, they'd get a book, they'd get a bottle of wine, they'd get a, you know, something, you know, they'd get this bolus of things that I used to get every single one of my clients. And then I'd get them something personal, which was just about them. And I used to spend, you know, probably 100, 150 quid on every client I had, but I was charging a lot of money. And it meant a lot to them. You know, these are people who probably at their stage of life weren't really getting a lot of gifts, weren't really getting a lot of presents. It meant a lot to them, you know, and it meant a lot to me because they've stuck by me and they paid their bills on time and they've done all that. They meant a lot to me.
Cool. So on that, the last point then, business acumen. What are the, I know that that could probably be a week-long chat in itself, but so what are the where are the quick wins? What are the crucial things that a PT should be making sure are in place?
Realize that there's a lot of shit in any business. The stuff that you don't enjoy is the stuff that will probably be most beneficial to you. I know that kind of sucks to say that. Is that the PTs have this thing about, I've got to enjoy what I do. I've got to enjoy my work. I've got to enjoy, you know, everything I do about work. Unfortunately, when you start any business, most PTs in the grand scheme of things are starting their businesses right now. You know, and if they're not starting the business, chances are they've got decent business acumen anyways. They need to get used to numbers. They need to understand their business finances. They need to understand what's going in, what's coming out. They need to understand what they can invest into marketing, what they can't invest into marketing. They need to have budgets. They need to have goals. They need to set goals on a daily basis. And they need to be reaching them. They need to have plans. They need to have a social media plan. They need to have a business plan. They need to have a scaling plan. You know, where's the business going to be in 5 years? They've got to have all of this stuff in place. You know, not immediately, but they need to start building that. And if they're not building that, in 5 years, they're going to kick themselves and they're going to complain and they're going to moan and they're going to go, look, nobody ever taught me that. Nobody ever showed me that. I get that. You know, I've spent my life trying to figure out need states of firstly clients and then coaches. You know, I spent most of my life around personal trainers. I know what the need states are. You know, so we created, you know, the academy. So the business acumen is our most, you know, it's our busiest course. You know, we get more people on the business acumen course than any other. We get more interaction on the business acumen course. Because ultimately that results in people making more money. Somebody gets better as a coach doing the coaching course. It doesn't always, there's no kind of, oh, I've made more money because I'm a better coach. It's almost like an indirect thing. People love the business acumen because it results in them making more money and they can see that. You know, they can see it on paper. They're like, oh, okay, I've just made more money because of this thing that I did that I wasn't doing before. You know, so business acumen is all about all of that stuff. You've got to understand things that you probably weren't trained in understanding and probably don't, for the most part, most people don't want to understand. I don't want to understand how to do my year end, so I pay someone to do it. I just see that as undue stress for me. I pay someone to do all my year end, do all my accounts, because I don't like all that. But most of my days nowadays are spent on spreadsheets. I spend most of my time on either Lucid Chart, producing workflows, spreadsheets, producing, you know, again, similar sort of things, workflows or charts or, you know, gauging stuff and operating how a business is running, or, you know, putting together social media plans, social media planners, putting together, you know, the next series of recipe books that we're going to do, the next, you know, most of my time spent with that, you know, which is stuff that 10 years ago, I've gone, no, I don't want to do that. I enjoy it. I love it. You know, I love a spreadsheet now. So you've got to evolve and you've got to understand that if you want to run a business, a big successful business, you've got to understand something about business. Crazy, right?
Mental. Josh, as we approach the sort of the last 10 minutes or so, have you got any questions that haven't already been covered?
I have always got questions.
Fire
So,
away.
Phil, talking to kind of looking at your kind of early steps within the fitness industry, obviously you said that your business grew very rapidly and you were always kind of fully booked and you had waiting lists and stuff. Who were your kind of early inspirations? Who did you turn to when you were looking to grow and learn more about the fitness industry or anatomy or whatever? Who did you go to?
Right, before I answer this, Josh, do you know how old I am?
I don't actually.
Right. Let's say this was a long time ago, right? So when I started in the industry, there was no internet. Well, there was, but it was Encarta was the thing you got information from. If either of you remember what Encarta was. Yeah. So Encarta was about your best source of information on anything, and typically that was more to do with things like wildlife and human history and blah blah blah. But none of that existed. So when I decided I was getting into this industry, my resources and my people that I could go to were very limited. I got the idea, I think, through the fact that I wanted to be a graphic designer. I trained to be a graphic designer. That was my thing. I wanted to do graphic design or product design. I was very creative. I loved that sort of stuff. I always wanted to do something I enjoyed. That was always something that, I don't know how I developed that mindset, but that was always something I wanted to do. I never wanted to be stuck in a job that I didn't enjoy. So I worked hard at that. And I did a lot of jobs I not necessarily didn't enjoy, but I did for the means to an end when I was younger. I had a job since my first job I got when I was 11 or 12. It was 11 or 12. And I've worked every week of my life since I was 11. There's never been a time when I haven't had a job. Even at university, I had a job at university. I paid for my way through university by having a job. And I'd work like 3 to 4 nights a week. I'd work at university to pay for my studies and blah blah blah. So it was, it's in that whole process, and how do you map all that out, and how do you come to that means to an end. So it's the inspiration, I guess, at the time was more to do with the industry, more to do with the fitness aspect to it, which was stuff I enjoyed. It was life changer for me. Once I started training and I started losing weight, I got a lot more respect. I changed my mentality on a lot of things. Negatives became positives and blah blah blah. So that all kind of stemmed from that. And then as I went through, the resources that we had for fitness were very limited. There was local WH Smiths in the town that I'd quite often go down and buy a magazine. So, Muscle and Fitness was about Muscle Media. I don't know whether you remember Muscle Media, which was ES. It was Bill Phillips's publication. And they had like a little science section in there. So they used to get people who would write about science, muscular development, which was like proper hardcore bodybuilding. But they had a science section in there that they used to talk about science. And there was the likes of Poliquin used to write in there. Czech used to write in there. And at the time, those were the two big names, Poliquin and Czech. So they were the only two people really that were talking about our industry or fitness or strength training or bodybuilding or whatever it might be. And Czech was very much the functional stuff. Poliquin was very much again, functional, but he was talking more about performance. But there was no one really talking about kind of the bodybuilding apart from the magazines. So really, I had limited resources. UltraFit, I used to subscribe to UltraFit. I don't know whether you remember UltraFit. So that was a magazine that was focused a lot around endurance sports. There was a lot of thing about cycling, running, all those different things. And then obviously you had the fitness industry, which at the time was, classes. I used to teach a lot of classes when I was younger because that was what the fitness industry was about as well. And there was a lot of people in that industry giving out very relevant information about teaching classes, so movement patterns and things like this. Biomechanics was a little bit about. So with respect to inspiration, there wasn't really anyone that was massively inspiring. There was just sources of information. And I remember, this is actually quite a funny story there. There was a guy that used to be a personal trainer on TV. He was a celebrity trainer. He was, he used to do morning TV. And ironically, there was a nutritionist with him who used to work alongside him. And bizarrely, I actually ended up working with the nutritionist later on in my career, like literally 20 years later. who's a good friend of mine now, and he was the nutrition guy that the morning TV, I can't remember whether it was GMTV or one of them, they used to go to. But then the personal trainer was actually a guy in the fitness industry who used to do a lot of classes. He was actually from an aerobics background. He was a world champion aerobics instructor and various other things. So I kind of looked up to this. I want to be a celebrity trainer. I want to train famous people. That sounds fun. You know, I came from a little village, little town. I was like, a celebrity was like a big thing. You know, if there was a celebrity in town, staying in our local town, the town used to go nuts. Everybody used to know where they were, and it was crazy. And bizarrely enough, years and years and years later, there was a guy who approached me for some personal training at one of the gyms I worked at. And I recognised the name, and I was like, I couldn't put my finger on it. And I actually went away and I Googled his name, and it was him. So he signed up, and I personal training for years.
Wow.
So a good friend of mine. He actually runs one of the training providers now. But yeah, he was the first celebrity trainer I had exposure to. And then there was a few others that were kicking around at the time. I can't remember the names, but I remember real like cheesy sort of celebrity personal trainers as they were in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, inspiration wise, there wasn't really a lot. So my inspiration came from, you know, I just wanted to do better. I wanted to be a better trainer. I wanted to be a better coach, and wherever I could claw information from, I took it. You know, I used to read a lot and various, you know, I think I actually have a couple of books kicking around somewhere which had at the start of my career, the backs are falling off, and you know, and a lot of it's nonsense. And that was the problem back then, is a lot of the information was nonsense because people were asking people to talk about things they weren't versed in. So like, you know, the Poliquin stuff, you know, they asked him, people were asking questions about nutrition. So he answered to the best of his ability. Unfortunately, that wasn't really his strong point. His strong point was strength training, which he was phenomenal at. But then, you know, years down the line, he got absolutely persecuted for all of that information that he'd given out that people were asking for that was actually largely incorrect.
Yeah.
You know, so but in his channel of strength training, there wasn't many people any better. And even to this day, there's, you know, his knowledge around strength training is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a struggle. It was a long time ago, Josh, and there wasn't a great deal of resources back then. My camera's gone again. I don't know what's going on. Let me flip it. I'm going to switch the camera to my laptop camera.
No worries.
I'm going to go a bit old school.
You got anything else, Josh?
I have indeed. So
you can see on my bare shelves now.
The illusion.
The illusion's gone.
Mm. So obviously you said you've been in the industry a long time. Do you have any choices that you regret or that you would change looking back?
Choices as such. There was a bunch of things that I'd have done very differently. You know, again, the things that I try and encourage people not to do now. It was all, you know, everybody wanted to belong to something. You know, it's life, right? Everybody wants to belong to something, or they want to do something, or you know. So it was systems. So you kind of felt the need that you had to be aligned with a system. You know, you had to have a diet that you promoted. You had to have a training method that you promoted, and it was just that weird thing where everybody felt, and you'd kind of shift from one to another. You know, everybody was either, you know, it had to be paleo, or you had to be keto, or you had to be, and even to this day, people still do it. And I'm like, hold on, you know, I don't need to be any of these. I just need to find the relevant one that works for the relevant person at the relevant time, and ultimately, nearly all of them work in some way, shape, or form. And am I bothered too much about which is better than the other? Better needs context, right? So better needs to know, is it better because someone actually does it? Most of the time the answer is yes. You know, why is something better? Because I do it. You know, and when does it become worse? When you stop doing it, and then you move on to something else. You know, I've had diets in the past, you know, like celebrities I've dealt with. Keto diets work great with celebrities, not because they're keto, but because it's a very easy rule to live by. You just don't eat carbs. Really easy rule to live by, and a really easy way to get people to keep their calories down.
Yeah.
Because if you have a rule that says you can't snack on anything that's got carbs in it, all of a sudden you're very limited as to what your choices are. So it worked really well in traveling. It's really easy. You know, you get on a plane. What do? You just eat the meat. You eat the meat and you eat the fats. You leave everything else. You know, so those systems are very, very simple. It's a bit like, you know, there's a lot of like sporting endeavors and things like this. You know, a lot of celebrities now do jiu-jitsu, right? Brazilian jiu-jitsu, fairly safe. You know, unless you get a straight arm or a knee in the face, you're fairly safe. It's great conditioning. It's phenomenal strength-wise. It's great for self-defense, and also you can get in great shape without the risk of somebody whacking you in the face. You know, so it's very popular with celebrities, and it's a great discipline. So it's knowing those systems. So I think what I'd do, I'd try and keep myself away from feeling the need to be affiliated with this system or a method of eating or training.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see it all the time in UK PTs, and I know, Mark, you've commented on a few posts where someone's like, this is my method, this is it, and then people can't seem to open up their mind to anyone else's approach at all. We see it all the time. It is infuriating.
Well, we get probably routinely one a month at least of people with our recipe books. They go, do you do a recipe book that has this specific, you know, do you do a recipe book that's only 20 grams of carbs throughout? I'm like, no. And then I'm like, do I go down that wormhole of trying to explain to all these people as to why? I'm like, they didn't sign up for the service for that reason. You know, if they want educated and they want to know more about, you know, how you approach these things, you know, ultimately a recipe book isn't for someone to cook every single thing in there. It's so people can make better choices. Yeah. You know, they can make better choices of the things they probably currently do. You know, if you can teach someone how to make something that tastes pretty much the same, but has a couple of hundred less calories in it, you're winning. Yeah. You know, with the skills they've got, right? So you might need things that are very, very quick and easy. You might need things that are a little bit more complex, and you've got to fulfill those, again, need states, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
Mark,
I think that ties in with what will probably be, well, it's definitely my final question, and it'll probably be the last one of the lot, and it's regarding behaviour change. So a lot of PTs will look at nutritional strategies and training methodologies, getting your steps up and things like that. What could PTs be doing differently to get better results in relation to changing the behavior of their clients?
Firstly, acknowledge the behaviors. So you need to know what the behaviors are to start with, and realize that you don't need to change a behavior, you need to modify a behavior. So too many people are trying to change them. They're going, look, you do this, you should stop doing that and start doing this. I'm like, no. You should modify the current behavior. So you modify the current behavior and you go, right, you know, like the example I gave to you before about the spaghetti bolognese, right? Does somebody need to stop eating spaghetti bolognese? And realistically, they're going to do that for the rest of their life. No, they're not. You know, short term, yeah, but it depends on what their goals are. You know, it depends who they are. If they're a celebrity, you know, an actor for a role, and they've got 12 weeks to get in shape, I'm going to tell them, no, you're not having spaghetti bolognese for 12 weeks. It's no biggie. You know, but if they're eating with a family and blah, 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 I'm going to go, like, what we need to do is the goal is to energy in versus energy out. That's the goal. If the goal is to lose weight or get in shape, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a spaghetti bolognese recipe that's slightly lower in calories that you can eat with your family. Done. You know, but I'm also going to make sure they're very conscious and aware, probably at that point, of portion control, because studies tell us that when somebody acknowledges that something is lower in calories, they eat more of it. You know, years ago, I remember I was at a conference, and what they did is they did two tables. They put two tables of, it was a fitness crowd, and they put two tables out, and on one table they put labels on all the food saying low calorie chocolate brownie, low calorie, whatever it might be. And it was literally all sweets and desserts, but everything they wrote, low calorie, low calorie. And they put the tables in separate rooms. And obviously it's not a controlled experiment, but it was an interesting thing to see. And the guy who was running it said, come and have a look at this. So we went and we saw the table that had the low calorie labels on it, and it was empty. It was desolated. And the other one, which didn't have the low calorie labels on, was still half full. And that was to do with that peer pressure. So these fitness people didn't want to be seen to eating the full fat brownie, but when they were informed they were low calorie brownies, it validated it. So everybody ate them all. So you've got to be very careful about that. So it was an interesting social experiment, obviously not very well controlled, but ultimately it kind of resulted in really confirming what we already knew, is that if things are labeled low calorie, people tend to eat a little bit more of them.
Cool.
I have one final question.
Okay.
because we normally say this at the end, but this is the question section, so this makes sense. If people want to reach out and find you or find more information about what you do and your various businesses, where are the best places for them to go?
You'll find me on all social channels as Phil Learney. That's Learney. You'll also find me on Instagram, which is probably my most active platform, which is at the PT Coach, because that's what I do. I coach PTs for the most part. So we run the Advanced Coaching Academy. So there's advancedcoachingacademy.com. That's an educational platform. We have 3 courses: business acumen, applied nutrition, and advanced coaching. Again, all relevant for most of the fitness industry who have, qualified as level 3s or whatever it might be, or are currently in the process of doing that. Business acumen, again, like I said, is very, very popular. And then we do assets. We produce a lot of material for the industry. We've just released, we're going to be doing Christmas cards. So you get custom branded Christmas cards. They get your logos and everything put on them. And that's pretty much all the stuff we do it's custom branded. So we brand it up to your business. We do recipe books. We're on to recipe book number 21, I think we are now. So we've got 21 recipe books that have came out. We've done over 500,000 assets, pieces of material for businesses since we started this. We've got books on calorie guides. So again, your clients need to write calorie guides. You give them a custom branded calorie guide with all your logos and your intros and things like that on there. We do an eating out guide, which helps them do it. And part of the recipe package, they also get guides to all the commercial eateries. So they get all the calorie counts for Pret, for McDonald's. Obviously, right now, they're probably not much use to anybody, but going forward, it helps your clients make choices, or it's a great reference material for you as a coach to help them choose things. And obviously, it keeps you within your remit, because ultimately, you're just helping people curate their diets. You're not giving them plans, which again is out of our legal remit as coaches, unless obviously we're registered dietitians. But you can help people put together their plans, and that facilitates you doing that, and makes it easy and keeps you within your remit. So we do all of that, and again, you'll find all that on the Advanced Coaching Academy site. You'll find it through the other channels.
Nice. Sounds good, Mark.
Perfect. It is, Phil, it's time for us to masturbate.
You carry on.
I've finished. No, it's time for us to do it together now. Right, I've got what's left of my my names in the hat there. I just need to ask you to pick a hand, left or right.
Hold on, what's this? Left one. Is
Left
it your
one.
left or my left?
My left, there one. Everyone always asks me to masturbate with my left hand. So we have got in that hand technology. So
okay.
What's going to happen? Josh, shall we ask Phil to go for or against technology? I'm thinking probably against.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, Phil, you are going to have 60 seconds to tell us why technology is a pile of shit and should never be used or trusted. And then either me or Josh are going to give the counter argument, 60 seconds, talking about how wonderful it is. Josh, are you doing it or am I?
I debated against Emma Story-Gordon, so you're actually up this time.
Okay, so it's me. Right. So,
how long
which
have I got?
round do you want to do it? Josh, you can decide. Are we going for first or against?
We're going to go against first. We'll go Phil first.
So, Phil, you'll be first. And this is tongue-in-cheek. It's off the cuff. You're not going to be quoted on this or held to account on it. It's just a bit of a piss take.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, 60 seconds starting now.
Right. The reason that we've got to go against technology, and the reason technology is wrong, is that technology is evolving. And what's ultimately happening is, again, it's very much like the Terminator scenario, right? Is that artificial intelligence and machine learning, everything is moving towards that. So when you go on your social media, technology is the reason that you're getting false news. Everything is mocked up, everything is created, everything is false, everything is generated by computers. So we can put your face on my face, we can put your voice on me, whatever it might be. So we can't believe anything. So therefore, if we move back away from technology and we start to go into normal human interaction, what we're getting is we're getting a face-to-face, communication with people. So we know it's real. We pick up books. We know that the books, for the most part, we're reading what we're reading. We know whether it's fictitious or whether it's non-fictitious. So technology, the problem we've got there with that is moving so fast. And with it moving so fast is that we're starting to miscommunicate with people, and we're also starting to learn things that aren't true. And the more things that we learn that aren't true, the more then we start to put trust in technology, and technology starts to become the destruction of mankind.
Oh, Phil, if only that was true. Now, you see, the thing is about technology is that it just makes our lives so much easier. Back in the day when we were little kids, if we wanted to find out a piece of information, we had to ask our parents if we could walk into town. We had to go to the library, find out what aisle it was on. We had to get an encyclopedia. We maybe had to photocopy it, take it home. That was a ball ache. No wonder I achieved fuck all at school, because it was too difficult to obtain the information. Whereas now it's all just sitting there in the palm of my hand. With a click of a finger, I can find out any piece of information I want. And as this is the mass debate section, when I was growing up, if you needed a wank, you had to go into the woods and hope that someone had dumped some porn mags. Now you don't have to. You've got technology to help you. It is available 24/7, whether you're booking a flight, whether you're contacting friends from around the world, or whether you are trying to upskill yourself in one particular area or another. Technology is the future, and it should be cherished.
So,
And that's the problem with a lazy society.
Phil, I just have to say, I don't think we've ever had a guest that can speak as fast as you can.
I've put little subtitles on.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you're gonna have to northern subtitles. You're like, aye, second lad.
No.
Phil, the final section, and it is called False, False, True. Me and Josh are going to ask you to read out your 3 statements with your best poker face, and then we're going to try and decide which is the true statement.
Okay. So although physical appearance may tell you otherwise, I used to play cricket at quite a decent level and quite a high level. And I once scored a century. That's 100 runs, for those of you who don't understand cricket, against a team, and they had their professional player was Malcolm Marshall. For those of you, again, that don't know cricket, Malcolm Marshall was one of the quickest bowlers that the West Indies had. Okay?
Yeah.
I once got caught up in a crime ring in Dubai. So I was in Dubai, and as you know, the law in Dubai is all really interesting. And inadvertently, I actually got caught up in a crime ring through some people that we knew there. And because of that, ended up in prison for a night in Dubai, which was quite a scary sort of scenario.
And the third one?
One evening when I was working, we got shot at with a semi-automatic weapon.
Oh, I like all of them, Phil.
Same.
Right. Let me analyze this. I don't think it's impossible for you to have been a tasty cricketer back in your day. I'm just trying to do the maths on when Malcolm Marshall might have retired. I think the first one could very well be true, but I think you maybe scored a 50, not 100, or maybe it was like Courtney Walsh was bowling, not Malcolm Marshall, or there'll be some little discrepancy in there. So I'm gonna say false, but I think it's close to being true. Number 2, did you get hooked up with a crime ring in Dubai? It's not difficult to do that in Dubai because it's a very strict place.
And a very dodgy place as well.
Yeah, very dodgy. And did you get shot out? Did you get shot out with a semi-automatic weapon? I think that one could be true as well. I'm gonna shoot down the middle, and I'm gonna go for number 2. But I think I think I could be wrong. Josh?
Yeah, so I think the Dubai one could be true, but I'm actually going to go for number 3. I think the semi-automatic weapon. Which one is
Phil,
it?
put us out of our misery.
Right. So the cricket century. I didn't score a century. I did play against Malcolm Marshall. I think I got about 5 runs, and he was bowling. He was bowling off about 5 paces, and he was bowling spin. And he threw a faster one in that I didn't even see, and it took my middle stump out off 5 paces. So yes, I did play against Malcolm Marshall, but I didn't score a century. The crime ring in Dubai. Spent a night in prison. No, I didn't. I didn't spend the night in prison. I did get kind of caught up in a little bit of an incident with the police out there through somebody that we kind of knew, that we kind of didn't. But we ended up in the desert with a police car and in the middle of nowhere, which was an interesting experience. So the third one is in fact true. We were working in a. This was how I paid my way through university. Is that I worked and I did security, and I did all my licenses and blah blah blah, and did some security in there, and worked on the doors on weekends in various places. We're working on a very interesting nightclub in Luton, and yes, as somebody drove by and sprayed the wall with an semi-automatic weapon.
Wow.
Fortunately for us, it didn't hit anybody. I don't think the intent was actually to hit anybody. I think it was more to put the shit up us. But it was a very interesting experience. And the last time I visited there, the holes were still in the wall, which is a few years ago. So I'd like to think they've probably been patched up by now. But yeah.
Wow.
Jeez. Well, happy days, good ones. Hopefully everyone now knows a little bit more about Phil Learney.
There you go.
Josh, just as a final parting words of wisdom, there was a question that popped up in the UK PTs group, and just while we've got Phil, we'll just kind of let him digest it for his parting words.
Yep.
Do you mean yesterday?
Do you mean the one about being the only personal trainer?
Yes.
Cool. So Rachel has asked. Let me just find the question. She's basically asked, what are the pros and cons of being the only personal trainer in a facility?
And there was someone commented saying they're in the same position and they're starting to think that the reason there's no other PTs working there is because the gym is dead. The clients don't want personal training.
Okay. Just again, bit of context. The first gym I worked in didn't even do personal training. I had to actually propose it to the powers that be. So it was part of a group, and they didn't do personal training. And I basically, I put them in a position where I said, look, if you don't let me do personal training, I'm going to leave. So they said, look, and their argument is that they didn't want to put my income in jeopardy, because obviously what was going to happen is I was going to reduce my gym hours to facilitate having time for PT, but obviously then if nobody signed up, I was basically on minimal hours, right? So they let me do it. It was a roaring success. I was jammed. I was the only personal trainer in there at the time, and then I helped them develop it across the whole group. So the pros and cons really at the time were, the cons were that nobody really understood, and bear in mind this is a lot of years ago, where I was in the Lake District, personal training didn't exist. Nobody did personal training. It was something people knew about from people in London did it, blah, 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 but they didn't know about personal training. So one of the main things there was obviously explaining what personal training was. Slightly different world now because everybody knows what personal training is. Unfortunately, that experience of personal training that people typically relate back to is shit. So you've got to have a lot of clarity with respect to what you're offering. You've got to make sure that the few clients that you do have are going to talk about your services, which means you've got to be good. And the benefit to people within that facility. Again, going back on a point I made earlier, it depends on the area. If there's wealth in that area and people can afford personal training. It's not they don't want it, it's just they don't know they need it. So you've got to get that point across. If it's a low income area, maybe personal training is wrong, and maybe you should be doing small group coaching. So you can quite easily in an area that's kind of middle ground, it's much easier to actually get 2 or 3 people who are friends onto a small group coaching model than it is to get a single person doing it, because they get accountability, they all turn up because they've got that, it's that notion of, I used to teach a spin class on a Friday night at one of the facilities I used to go to, and without fail, everybody turned up every single week and it was the same people. They'd like rush to book in and it was always the same people, with the exception of I think 1 or 2 bikes that used to get kind of fluxed between people. And the reason for that is they all became accountable to each other. So they'd be asking on the Wednesday, are you going to spin it on Friday night? Are you going to do this? Are you doing this? So you inadvertently create accountability to the other people within that group. So sometimes those sort of things work. But with respect to being the only one there, ultimately you've got the pick of the crop. You've got everybody there. You're just going to make them aware of your services, what you do. That service has got to be good and relevant. There's no point in having this service that is irrelevant to these people. And this is something that people have got to understand, is that people ask us about our recipe books. What's the best way of using them? Depends on who you're targeting. Depends what you're using them for. So they're great as a piece of lead capture. They're also great as something to sell. They're also great as something to add to your current services. But it depends on who your clientele are as to where that sits the best. If you're charging a lot of money for personal training, adding a couple of quid for a recipe book every single month isn't going to be a big deal. If you've got 20 clients, that's all of a sudden you're getting into profit there. So it's a massive kind of depends answer with respect to what do you do, but it is about getting known. So for the 2 people I think that you said that asked the question, they need to introduce themselves to everybody. So I would make it a solid task. The first thing that you need to do in that facility is make sure every single person knows that you're a personal trainer. Every single person in that facility knows your name, and you know something about every single person that comes in that facility. That's the first task I'd give people. I've got a spreadsheet that I used to give people, and I go away and go, I want you to list the name of every single person that walks in the gym. I want you to write something personal about them, they know about them. And the reason I do that is I used to do that because I had a terrible memory. So when I moved to a new facility, particularly the one in London that I moved to in London, because the one in London, I'd been out of personal training for a couple of years because I've been working in an office building gyms. So my experience with gym setups and blah, 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 I came from that alongside a couple of others that I helped set up. But I'd been working on building a couple of premier gyms in London that they actually ran out of budget for eventually, and we ended up, not following through with it. But that wasn't my budget; that was their budget. But I was in charge of the medical team, and I was in charge of the personal training team. So I had to bring all that together, and obviously the overseeing factor of that is we had to develop the gyms and the equipment and all that sort of stuff. So we have relations with all the equipment manufacturers. So when I moved that gym in London, and again, I'm just adding context there. When I moved that gym in London, is that I knew nobody. They didn't know me. They knew nothing about me. At the time, I was powerlifting, so I was quite a big, blocky kind of, probably not relatable to a lot of people. So I made sure I was relatable. So I went around, I introduced myself to as many people in there as I could. I got to know people. I'd say hello when they walked in. I'd say goodbye when they left. I'd chat to them about things when they had opportunity. I wouldn't be interrupting them on the gym floor and tapping them on the shoulder going, hey, my name's Phil. I would catch them as they were coming in and catch them when they were leaving. And I used to stand at reception. And this is a story I've told a million times, and I'll tell it a million times again, is that I used to stand at reception because when they beep in, their names used to come up on the thing. So I used to go up and introduce themselves. I used to speak to them by name. So he'd check in, John would check in, I'd go onto the gym floor and go, hey, John, noticed you check in, blah, 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 my name's Phil, etc., etc. And I'd find something to relate to. If you walk in with a motorbike helmet, I'd talk to you about his motorbike. So it's just creating a relationship with everybody in there. And the great thing is you've got nobody else getting in your way. And if you do that and nobody wants to sign up for personal training, especially when they're aware of your services, chances are it's probably the wrong facility.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Don't be too early to write that off, though.
No, especially considering what you said earlier about if you're training face to face and you've got 10 to 15 clients that are training 2 or 3 times a week, that's a very, very good business in there. So if you've got the whole gym to yourself and there's no other PTs as competition, it's easier to find those 10 to 15 people, depending on the price point, the demographic, and the needs of the members. But you would have thought even in no matter what area of the country, any gym that's got 100 members, you'd be struggling to find one that's then not got 10 people that might have the finances to take on PT as well.
Yeah, and also you got to remember that if there's only 100 members, you've got what's called exclusivity.
Yeah.
So now it's an exclusive gym. Now personal training becomes more exclusive. People like shit they can't have. People queue up for it. My son wants a PlayStation, the new PlayStation 5. You can't buy it anywhere. You can't get even a pre-order. Do you think they do that intentionally? They know full well that they're going to run out of stock. Apple do. Every time they release an iPhone, they know they're going to limit stocks because it creates demand. And remember, as a PT, you've got to remember that you are a limited commodity. You as an individual are a limited commodity. People forget that fact. There is only one of you. And if you're good, you're going to be sought after.
Makes a lot of sense.
Perfect.
Good times. So,
we're done. Phil, thank you very, very much for your time. Not only for your time as well, the quality of what you've talked about, as well as the quantity, because we're just about to hit the 2-hour mark as well, which is way beyond what we were hoping to get out of you, and testament to you for over-delivering. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for humouring us as well, because we're just a pair of numpties who are fucking about, making shit up as we go along, bringing guests on and asking silly questions. But hopefully there's plenty of substance in here. And for any PT, whether they're in the game for 2 minutes or 2 decades, there's plenty that they can take from that to benefit them. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I found there was an air of self-depreciation there, Mark.
Never.
Every time.
I have to get it in. I have to get it in myself before all the trolls.
Is it sympathy you want? Do you want sympathy?
I'll take a little bit. All right, mate. Good luck with your house move, and no doubt.
Thank you so much.
Next time we're allowed to have anything remotely resembling an expo, I'm sure I'll see you there.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Thanks for having me.
Phil.
Thanks again, Phil.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. Don't forget to check back weekly for new episodes. If you want to join the UK's largest Facebook group for personal trainers, just search for UK PTs.